Wow, Los Feliz audiences are the kindest audiences in the world. I haven't done anything yet. Welcome to the Autry and to Council District 4 Candidate Forum, brought to you by the Feliz Improvement Association. My name is Phil Leirness. I am a longtime resident of Los Feliz and for many years the voice of the Los Angeles Breakfast Club. I say that for the smattering of applause it always garners. For those of you who might not know, the Los Angeles Breakfast Club is a now 99-year-old institution that was formed right here in Griffith Park and which still meets early every Wednesday morning for food, fellowship, and to become more deeply connected to this city that we all love. It is a nonpartisan club, a club where, quite frankly, it is impossible to take oneself seriously at all. It is a club of hospitality, of friendship, and of celebration. And the older I get, it's this last attribute that seems to mean the most to me, celebration. Put simply, we celebrate things to express why people, places, things, ideas matter to us. And so I know that this event tonight is called a candidate forum, which for many of us means a debate. But to me, it's an opportunity to celebrate. Not just an opportunity for those who are going to take the stage to express what matters to them, but it's an opportunity for all of us to express how much we love this city. It's a celebration by virtue of all of us being here. We are celebrating not only Los Angeles, we are celebrating democracy, we are celebrating public engagement. And so what I would like for you all to do, because I am very grateful that each and every one of you are here, I would like you to give yourselves a heartfelt round of applause for being here. You are all awesome. At the Breakfast Club, on mornings when it's my responsibility to set the tone for the festivities, I often will begin by expressing gratitude for the Gabrielino Tongva people who were the first caretakers of this land that has been so good to Angelenos for so long and who continue to have a sacred connection to the land to this day. And where better to celebrate that gratitude than in this theater that has been the home to Native voices for so many years. Native Voices, I gotta tell you, is one of the most vibrant, most significant theater companies anywhere, and it's a real pillar of the cultural landscape of Los Angeles. And where better to have a candidate forum than at an institution like the Autry, which is dedicated to revisioning the American West, by bringing together the stories of all peoples and by connecting the past to the present. After all, tonight, sure, you're not wrong. You might not be legion, but you are mighty in agreeing with me. Tonight, after all, we bring all of our stories, and the candidates bring their stories so that we can envision what the future of Los Angeles is going to be. So there is a great deal to celebrate tonight. And it's only possible, tonight is only possible, wow, without the hard work of the volunteer-run Los Feliz Improvement Association. For over 100 years, the Los Feliz Improvement Association has worked to foster community, to protect the environment, and to preserve our shared history. Historically, the LFIA has put on several large public events each year. But this is the first such gathering since the COVID pandemic. So tonight is a celebration for the LFIA as well because it's the return to in-person events. So we thank the Autry, we thank the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council, we thank the Los Feliz Improvement Association and the association's president, Deborah Matlock, who worked tireless hours organizing tonight's event. And finally, a few quick announcements. In the case of emergency, please note there are 2 exits at the front, 2 exits in the rear. The restrooms are located through a door in the lobby. Please silence your phones. We don't want to hear phone calls or alarms or alerts unless it's the alert played by our sound man, Quyen, when the candidates are out of time. Oh, it's a good one, too. Yeah, but you needed to be warned, believe me. Well, you don't want anybody thinking it's a fire alarm or something. Okay, also, please, if you're inspired to take a picture, just make sure that your camera flash is off before doing so. The stage positioning of the candidates this evening was established by a random drawing, and as I understand it, I will be introducing the candidates in order of the positioning from stage left to stage right, or from your right to your left, unless you're south of the equator, in which case I have no idea what it is. An immigrant to America, Nithya Raman is a graduate of both Harvard and MIT. She is the mother of twin second graders and an urban planner. After founding a volunteer-led nonprofit in response to rising homelessness, Nithya ran for city council, and since 2020 has served as the Los Angeles City Councilwoman for District 4. She is the mayor's appointee to both the South Coast Air Quality Management District and the Los Angeles County Affordable Housing Solutions Agency, and as of this year, she serves as the chair of the council's Housing and Homelessness Committee. Please welcome Nithya Raman. A graduate of UCLA Law, Ethan Weaver has served the people of Los Angeles as a deputy city attorney. While in the city attorney's office, Ethan has helped spearhead Project LEAD, a program that diverts homeless substance abusers from the criminal justice system into drug treatment and mental health programs, job training, job placement, and housing programs. Ethan grew up in a strict religious home with parents who held anti-LGBTQ+ views and beliefs. It wasn't until he attended college here in Los Angeles that he was able to live openly as a gay man. And today, he lives in the 4th District with his fiancée, Michael. Please welcome Ethan Weaver. Levon Baronian, who told me to call him Lev, was born and raised in Los Angeles. He is a father, a family man, a neighborhood council member, and founder of youth nonprofit programs. During his more than 20 years as a computer scientist and software engineer, Lev spent 8 years working for NASA, where he earned awards for introducing technological advancements to the agency. A small business owner who has helped other small businesses get started, he is interested in helping small businesses reach their full potential. Please welcome Lev Baronian. And one more time, let's show our appreciation for the candidates for Council District 4. Our moderator for this program has worked as a journalist in Los Angeles since moving here on New Year's Day in 1991. He has said that the best part of his job is meeting the smartest, most interesting people and bringing their voices to us. He is a reporter and journalist who covers politics, criminal justice system, civics, and democracy for LAist and the NPR station KPCC. Please welcome your moderator for this evening, Frank Stoltze.
going to tell Larry Mantle I want that kind of introduction every time I go on the air with him. Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's going to be a great night for a debate. It's an important race. It's an important race for a lot of reasons. You know, City Hall has been called a place where there's a culture of corruption right now. In fact, just tomorrow, former council member Jose Huizar is expected to be sentenced to at least 9 years in prison for corruption. One of 3 over the last couple of years. 2 other members stand accused of corruption. And of course, there's the homelessness crisis. This is an important race, one that's being watched by some people across the city as a barometer on how people are feeling about the relatively progressive politics of the past few years. Of course, all politics is local, so we'll be getting into the concerns of Los Feliz residents, in particular tonight, your concerns. There are many outside influences in this campaign, not least the police union, and now has nearly $500,000 that it plans to spend against Nithya Raman, the firefighters union, spending big to elect Ethan Weaver. Meantime, the labor union Unite Here, which represents hotel and restaurant workers, spending to support Raman. But this is a chance for you to shut out all of the chatter and hear from the candidates themselves, to decide for yourself who you'd like to support to represent you on LA's 15-member city council. And I don't need to remind you, members of the LA City Council are powerful people. We have a weak mayor system here. Council members wield enormous influence over development, homelessness and housing projects, police patrols, and more. We will touch on all of those issues tonight using questions solicited from the community at large. The Improvement Association received over 100 responses, and that's where the questions came from. So without further ado, let's have a debate. The rules. You have 1 minute to answer each question. You'll get warnings at 30 and 15 seconds. At 0, the timer will go off. Do we want to hear the timer real quick? Is that possible? Just in case you are unsure of yourselves. And they'll be up for a minute of rebuttal if that's necessary. We'll start off with 2-minute opening statements. I don't know if we drew straws on who would begin. I don't think we did. So we'll begin with the challengers, starting with you, Ethan Weaver.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. It's so great to see a room full of people that really care about their community and want to learn more. So thank you so much. I never thought I was going to be running for office. This was never part of my life dream. I went to law school to be a prosecutor, and that's what I did. I've been a deputy city attorney for 9 years, and for the last 5 years, I was a neighborhood prosecutor. And if you don't know what that is, it's a prosecutor that works in the local community, solving problems on the ground, working in collaboration with city agencies and the community. And I'm so honored to see so many faces of community leaders in this room that I have served faithfully for years, and I'm proud to have their support. And I have their support and the support of so much of my community because I did what is fundamental to public service. Public service starts with showing up in rooms just like this, in living rooms, in community meetings, listening to what people need done for their community, and then taking action to do it. And that's why I'm running for city council, because from my position as a neighborhood prosecutor, I have seen a city that is systemically failing you. We all see the failures out on our streets, the homelessness on our streets, the lack of city services, things as small and but yet as important as potholes not being filled and trees not being trimmed, up to these major issues of public safety and homelessness. And all we keep hearing from our leaders is how important these issues are, but we keep hearing the same ideas just repackaged over and over with no results. And if you think the picture is bad from out in the community, from where you sit, let me tell you, as someone who works in the city with almost every city agency, the problems are even worse and run deeper than you know. And I'm running because I don't see anyone else putting forth solutions to the underlying issues, and I'm running to represent you and turn our city around. So thank you so much.
Levon Baronian.
Thank you so much. First off, I'd like to thank the LFIA for hosting this candidate forum. I'd also like to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight, and especially want to thank my family, Nora, my wife, and my 3 kids for being here tonight. I'm a lifelong Angelino, and I was born and raised in this great city. And for the last 7 years, I've served as an elected member of the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council, as was mentioned in the introduction. As such, I'm deeply dedicated to the future of Los Angeles. And unfortunately, we can all see that Los Angeles has a multitude of problems that aren't being solved. And these are complex problems. They're not problems that just require solutions on the surface level. We need individuals that are gonna roll up their sleeves, look at the underlying reasons for these problems, and approach them in a data-centric and analytical approach. And for 20 years, that's what I've been doing as a computer scientist and software engineer. I worked for NASA for 8 years, where I earned awards for actually introducing advancements to that federal agency. And that's what I want to bring to Los Angeles. We need creative specialists to bring us into the 21st century. Los Angeles actually has a lot of advantages. But unfortunately, these advantages and these opportunities have been squandered in many ways by career politicians and bureaucrats who effectively represent special interests much more than they represent the everyday concerns of Angelinos like you and me. We're ultimately a city that's stuck in the repetitive bureaucracy of failed policies. Like you, I'm a real member of this community. That's why I'm running. I'm the constituents candidate. I looked at these 2 candidates, and they might be great people, but I got in this race a little bit late because I wasn't impressed by either of them, and I wanted to run because I believe I can make a change. And as hopefully your city council member, I'm gonna prioritize the highest standards in investing in our infrastructure, public safety, accountability to our citizens, and work toward creating opportunities for Angelinos. Thank you.
Okay, let's hear from the incumbent, Nithya Raman.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nithya Raman. I'm an urban planner by training. I have a master's in urban planning from MIT. I'm a mother of twin second graders who attend Ivanhoe Elementary right here in Silver Lake. And I've been following a very unusual pathway into politics. I started a local nonprofit with some of my neighbors to address rising homelessness in this part of town. And when I saw that I just wasn't seeing the urgency that my neighbors and I felt for change being reflected in our local elected leadership, I decided to run, and I won against an incumbent for the first time in almost 20 years. In the last 3 years that I've been in this role, I've taken on a lot of challenges and made big strides in our neighborhood and citywide. We've implemented real governance reform in the wake of big scandals, including putting an independent redistricting amendment on the ballot in November, which I'm very proud of, and reducing land use discretion by council members. We've made a law that makes all new construction non-carbon free, basically, off of our reliance on fossil fuels. I've built protected bike lanes for the first time right here in Los Feliz, and I'm making big safety changes right here in Griffith Park that will help pedestrians be safer and bicyclists be safer and help us get out of our cars. But over the last 3 years, it's my work on homelessness that I'm the proudest of. We've worked to reduce encampments across the entire district and many in Los Feliz, at Hollywood and Brendo, Hollywood and Rodney, Hollywood and Lyman, 84 people along the LA River bike path, and across the entire district, Coldwater 101, Van Nuys 101. And we've done this through hard work, incredibly hard work, and a collaboration with my other partners. And it's this collaborative nature and this work ethic that I've brought to the table that has earned me the support of Mayor Bass, the LA County Democratic Party, as well as, of this morning, the LA Times. Thank you.
I'm so excited. The boo's given me the opportunity to make this announcement. Let's withhold our response, whether it's clapping or booing. I think that'll give us the best opportunity to hear the most from the candidates. We want to hear from the candidates tonight. We don't really want to hear from you. No offense.
We want to hear from you.
So we'll this time begin with you, Nithya, and then we'll work our way each time with a different person starting. And we're going to begin with Griffith Park. As with all of Los Angeles, Los Feliz has plenty of traffic issues. But unique to Los Feliz is our proximity to Griffith Park and the fact that the majority of traffic into and out of the park flows through our neighborhoods. Traffic is so bad at times that residents live in fear that emergency vehicles can't get through. Griffith Park is also served by fewer public transportation options than other parks of its size. How will you address this?
Well, we've been working very closely with our DOT and our park rangers to try and address traffic issues coming in and out of the park. A big source of congestion in and out of the park is at the Greek. And on concert nights, there are huge backups coming in and out of the park, leading to some of the most dangerous issues. And we've really tried to ensure that we are pushing for greater DOT intervention and management of those traffic jams, and ensuring that we're doing the most to make sure that traffic is moving very quickly in and out of the park at all of these moments when you're seeing high numbers of visitors. And we coordinate very, very closely with DOT to do that. It takes a proactive traffic management plan, and our office is in touch with DOT regularly in order to make sure that high traffic days are addressed proactively and with the community.
Okay. Lev.
Griffith Park in general is really near and dear to my heart. I've been going to Griffith Park since I was a kid. My grandmother used to take me there, and there was always a lot of traffic getting there. But obviously in recent years, things have kind of gotten out of control. One of the things I'm going to do first, if elected, is I'm going to create a special task force within the district, an urban transportation planning research and development task force, to work with the relevant agencies on finding solutions that are, again, data-driven and scientific in the way that we're looking at these things, right? There are traffic patterns. We do have data based on how many cars cross which intersection on a daily basis, during which times. This is all data that needs to go into the decisions that we're making. We shouldn't just be throwing things on a wall and seeing what sticks, right? We have to look at these traffic patterns and solve them with a data-driven approach. So we have to increase visibility, obviously, on these streets as well. There are certain things that we need to do to look at how to make these streets more accessible for everybody. But ultimately, LA is still a car-centric town, and we have to keep that in mind, and we have to solve this traffic problem. Thank you.
Nathan.
Great. So this is a problem that affects me. I'm one of your neighbors. I live in Los Feliz. And on most evenings, I avoid Los Feliz Boulevard like the plague. I know exactly what it feels like to be stuck there. And the thing is, we don't need to reinvent the wheel to help mitigate this problem. There's already a blueprint that works. At the blanking on theater, the Hollywood Bowl. What they've done is they've created off-site parking spots or parking lots in the valley and shuttle people in on buses. And it has dramatically reduced congestion around the Hollywood Bowl. And it's become actually a cultural center for people that ride that bus every year and make friends on the bus. This is a blueprint that's already worked at the Hollywood Bowl, and it can work at the Greek Theater. And these are the kinds of real, tangible interventions we need if we're going to reduce congestion on Los Feliz Boulevard.
Thank you. Let's talk about a bridge home. The bridge home Los Feliz site in Griffith Park was well supported by the community when it was proposed, with the promise that there would be extra attention paid to the site and extra police patrols through the use of a special enforcement zone. Unfortunately, those promises were not kept, and the site has become a focus of illegal activities in the area. Special enforcement zone signage is a requirement for more strenuous law enforcement at the ABH site, yet the signs have never been installed. Other council districts have installed signage and encouraged the LAPD to strenuously monitor crime at their ABH sites. Will you commit to adding the signage and strengthening law enforcement around the Los Feliz Bridge Home site? Let's start with you, Lev.
Thank you. I know that this bridge home is something that's of deep concern to this community in Los Feliz, because I have a lot of friends and family that live in Los Feliz, and they complain about this. Ultimately, the problem there starts with security, or the lack thereof, right? This has become a place where drug dealing is happening. Just last week, my staff and I went and posted out there for about an hour, and I literally witnessed drug deals happening in front of my very eyes. So I absolutely support increasing the signage, but I also think it starts with prosecution. It's important. I mean, we can't blame the LAPD. They're doing their job. But in many cases, the LAPD's hands are tied because prosecutors aren't prosecuting. So it has to start with enforcing the laws that we actually already have on the books in the city of Los Angeles. We have to differentiate between people that are homeless and people that are criminals. And people that are criminals in these facilities need to be prosecuted, and that's where we're failing right now as a government in prosecution of these crimes. So thank you very much.
Ethan.
That's a great point, and I have a lot of experience with the Bridge Home Shelter because when I was the Hollywood neighborhood prosecutor, we had one on Schrader, and it's a facility I got to know very well. And I did prosecute people in that area for dealing drugs and for vandalism and for all sorts of different crimes. And that is the missing piece. Well, that is one of the missing pieces, but it begins with a council office that keeps its promises. This community was promised that it would get additional enforcement resources and a camping zone around the shelter so that your community would be safe. And the city has violated its promise to you. And all of you in this community welcome that shelter. And now I hear from every corner that we want that shelter taken out. And this doesn't just affect our community negatively. Now anywhere in the city that the city wants to build a shelter and promises these kinds of interventions, the surrounding community says, absolutely not. We know the city is going to violate its promises. We are not going to accept it here. This isn't just about Los Feliz. This is about building the interventions we need everywhere.
Nithya, what about what's been called unkept promises?
Well, the Los Feliz Bridge Home site opened before I started in office. And I will say that I think for me, this kind of congregate shelter is often not the best kind of shelter. We opened a non-congregate site in Hollywood that I think is a much more effective site for bringing people indoors. When I started as a council member, there were tents right outside the Bridge Home facility. There was trash there. And what we've done is that we've actually housed everyone there. There are no tents in front of the facility right now. We pick up trash regularly. And LAPD, as it does for every single Bridge Home site across the district, are able to patrol and do what they need to do in order to keep the area safe. And that's a commitment that LAPD has made to every Bridge Home site, and they're funded to do it. One thing I will say is that people in the community have asked when this site will close. When we're facing such a huge shelter crisis, I think it's really important to make sure that we have places where people can be off the streets rather than in tents on the street and keep the entire community safe that way.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. The ABH site is meant to be temporary. The lease for the site was originally 3 years, which ended in June of last year with the possibility of 2 one-year extensions. The first of those extensions will end in June of this year. When the current lease extension ends, will you support renewing it for the final 1-year extension? And I believe we begin with Ethan now.
Well, given that those promises are not being kept, no. Why would the city continue to run an operation that has failed and when the city is failing to keep its promises? And one of the promises, too, was that once that shelter was no longer being used as a shelter, once the lease was up, it would be turned into a senior community center. And the senior community center across the street is dilapidated, it's falling apart, is a disservice and a disgrace to our senior community. And so I think given how many promises the city's violated, there's just no way we should renew that lease.
I believe we go to Nithya next.
I think if we can find alternatives to put people, I'm very open to finding other sites. The challenge is that Los Angeles has 1/3 of the shelter beds that it needs for its homeless population. It needs many, many more in order to get people off the streets. Homelessness in Los Angeles looks different from a city like New York, which has many more homeless people, but very few people who are living on the street because New York has a shelter bed for every person experiencing homelessness. Los Angeles doesn't. We have 1/3, and we're struggling to build more. And so in this context, I think we need to make sure that I'm working closely, which I am, with Mayor Bass on our plan to increase access to shelter across the entire city and ensure that we have places for people to go that are safe. To me, it is far better to have people inside a shelter with services, with security, rather than in tents on the street. It's unsafe, most unsafe for unhoused people, but it's unsafe for an entire community. And I want to really move us towards addressing homelessness in a serious way here in LA.
Lev?
This particular shelter was initially opened to be a temporary solution. It has now been several years, and that's not temporary at this point. We need to have a path to closing it down as soon as possible. That means that we need to find a place to have the people that actually want shelter to find some shelter, but this is not that place because because of the close proximity to the park, because of the close proximity to the neighborhood, and because it was ultimately promised to be a temporary solution. I commit to closing this place in the first year after getting elected.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about homelessness. What is your position on 4118, the section of the municipal code that prohibits camping within 500 feet of special areas like schools and parks? Do you support it, some of it, and why? So do you support some of it, all of it, how much of it, and why?
Well, 4118 is a multi-part law, and there's parts of it, like the ADA, accessibility rules around distance from driveways and other things that I have always supported, rules around camping in parks that I've always supported and maintained in our district. I did vote against 2 expansions of 4118, not because I support having homeless individuals on the street. The focus of my work has been getting tents off of our streets. And I've listed a number of locations where there were tents when I got elected, and now they're off our streets because of our work. But the reason I didn't support this new law is because it's bad policy. What these laws have done, the second parts of 4118 that we've passed, is that it has pushed homeless people around the neighborhood without actually getting people off the street. And if you look around at places where there are 4118 regulations, what you'll see is that either that the law is completely ineffective, that tents are just there where there's an enforcement regulation, or that tents have moved 50 feet down the street. And we need to be getting homelessness off our streets.
All right, Lev?
I support 4118 100%. As a father of 3 children, I don't want these these encampments, these tents, and everything else that goes along with it, the drug use and the crime around our kids, okay? My first responsibility as a father is the safety of my family and my children. And you all have either children or grandchildren or neighbors who have children or grandchildren. LA's a big city. There's no reason to have tents within 500 feet of anywhere near a school, anywhere that has children around it, any type of facility like that. I would support it 100%. In fact, I think we should look at more places where we need to prohibit tents. It's the unfortunate reality. We're not going to be able to get all tents off the streets in Los Angeles. Anybody that promises you that is lying to you. But there are places that tents shouldn't exist, and around schools is definitely one of them.
All right, Ethan, please hold your applause. Thank you.
So this is an issue I've worked on personally. As a neighborhood prosecutor, before this law was passed, I met with school principals and school administrators who were saying, Ethan, we are finding needles on our playgrounds. Men are doing lewd acts right outside of our gates. What are you going to do about it? And before the 4118 section was passed, I didn't have a tool. And this is why it is so important that we have this law, and I absolutely support it. And it's not about solving homelessness. The purpose of 4118 is about protecting our children. And just last week, my opponent was asked about this as well, and she said that kids are not kept safer because of tents not being around schools. And I absolutely disagree with her. It's not just whatever. It is your children's safety, and as your next city council member, I will put your kids' safety first above everything else.
We do have, we do have time for a rebuttal when somebody makes a specific accusation, so would you want to respond to that?
I think I really just want to convey that I do not believe that homelessness should exist. This is why I ran for office. I ran because I wanted to get people who were living in tents off the streets effectively and safely for them and for the entire community around them. It is possible. You can see the difference in approach in a city like New York and a city like Los Angeles. When you invest in shelter beds, you see so many fewer people on the streets. New York has a couple of thousand people who are living on the streets with a homeless population that's much larger than LA's, has 80,000 people. We have 45,000 people who are homeless, 15,000 shelter beds, 30,000 people living on the streets. And what 4118 does, the versions of it that we voted on, but which, by the way, our law is just it moves tents from one place to another. And when you move a tent from one street down that street, often it is moving in front of other children, other families. It does not solve the problem of homelessness. That is what we need to be focused on as a city.
Let's stay on the topic of homelessness if we can. Sections of CD4 have been burdened by oversized vehicles, RVs, parking on residential streets. Would you support a ban on RV parking in residential sections of CD4? Will you push for safe parking sites in CD4? And I think we start with you, Lev.
That's a great question because literally where I live in Sherman Oaks near Sepulveda Boulevard, there's a stretch between Magnolia and Burbank that has probably 15, 20 RVs parked there. I do support banning RV parking in streets. If anything, we need to find places that are dedicated just to that. They should not be alongside the main streets that we all travel along. Because ultimately, look, that is also a hub for potential crime.
I think the question specifically was residential streets, so you don't support parking in residential
Absolutely
areas.
not in residential streets, but not even alongside major thoroughfare that are ways into residential streets. Like Sepulveda Boulevard is technically not considered a residential street per se, but all around it are nothing but residences. So I would ban that. We should have special places where RVs can be parked. I'm not saying that people can't live in RVs. If it's better than living in tents in many cases, but it shouldn't just be anywhere you want to park it.
Ethan?
Yeah, this used to be the law. It was called 8502. This used to be the law, and I used to enforce it. But then it lapsed, and City Council chose not to renew it. And I think we absolutely need 8502 brought back because there are the worst possible place for people to be living in their vehicles is deep inside neighborhoods where not only is it impacting your neighborhood, but it's the hardest places to reach for outreach workers to get people off the streets and into housing. So I absolutely support bringing back the prohibition about camping inside on cars in residential neighborhoods. And we have options. It doesn't mean that people are just thrown into jail. We can build safe parking spots. It's something my opponent campaigned on. It's something that hasn't materialized. And so I absolutely think that this is an important first step in starting to manage this homeless crisis better on a daily basis.
Nithya.
I think that there is definitely a version of how we manage parking of oversized vehicles that I would absolutely support. And I think it's something that I've been very open to discussing in City Council and looking forward to continuing to engage with. I will just say that we are in a situation right now here in Los Angeles where often I see that our oversized vehicles are actually parked right under signs where they're saying you can't be parked here. And that is because of two reasons. One is that we lack as a city the enforcement capacity to actually deal with residential vehicles in this way, recreational vehicles in this way. And second is because even if there are signs, what happens is that RVs just move up and down the street. And that is not really a solution for this issue. This is why I've worked closely with Mayor Bass to actually do RV housing operations, like the one on Forest Lawn that we just did, where we got a number of RVs off the street, and also to prosecute vanlords, including one that had a number of RVs on Franklin, and all those RVs are gone. There's still a couple there, but a number of this single vanlords RVs are gone.
Let's move on to the topic of governance. Each council member gets access to discretionary funds through several sources. And the funds can be used in a variety of ways, including staff salaries or neighborhood improvement projects. Will you agree to make your CD4 office discretionary fund spending 100% transparent to the CD4 community on day one of your new or renewed term? And if not, why? Ethan.
Absolutely. And there's already a roadmap for this. Our previous city council member, David Rue, had a portal, a tracker on his website that you could see how every dollar was spent. And he had an advisory committee made up of community leaders from across the district that he met with on a monthly basis to hear what are your community's needs and how can we use this money effectively. When my opponent was elected, she immediately ended both of those tools of transparency. And I pledge to you that if I'm elected, I will bring that back and bring your voice back into the discussion about how discretionary dollars are spent. Because ultimately, those are not the council office dollars. Those are your dollars as taxpayers, and you should have a say in how they're spent, and you should absolutely know how each dollar is spent. Thank you.
So, Nithya, did you get rid of those tools, and if so, why?
Well, I didn't get rid of the tools of, I guess I didn't institute a community-based effort to allocate discretionary funds. What we did do is what a council office is supposed to do, which is to use requests coming from the community about unaddressed issues and make sure that we're using our council office's discretionary funds to fill gaps that the city's budget is unable to fill. We used our discretionary funds to ensure that we had money for things like outreach and engagement services for parts of the city where homeless services weren't going. We used that money to ensure that we were trimming trees that hadn't been trimmed quickly enough. We used that money to ensure that we were meeting service needs that depended on us actually paying overtime to overstretch city teams to do the work. And all of that was designed around requests that we got from the community and what people told us their needs were. And that's exactly what we've done.
All right, Lev?
That's a great question. Not just transparency in discretionary funds. By the way, the answer is yes. 100% transparency in every single dollar spent by my office, if elected, as part of discretionary funds will be reported immediately on the website, on the District 4 website. But in addition to that, I think we need greater transparency across the board in the city of Los Angeles. Just look at how much money we're spending on homelessness. $1.2, $1.4 billion. Again, I'm a data guy, I do the math. By the last counts, we have about 50,000 homeless in Los Angeles. If you do the math, that's about $24,000 per homeless. Where's that money going? Where is that money going? So not just about discretionary funds in this own district, 100%. I'm going to report all that immediately. In fact, as somebody who's a nonprofit volunteer, I've asked for discretionary funds from Ms. Raman's office. Unfortunately, they didn't grant our access, and I don't know why in reality. But yeah, 100% transparency into that and all funds.
All right, this is an interesting question. Let's continue with the idea of governance here. And what is the appropriate role of a council member with regard to issues of daily life, trash, streets, versus larger policy issues like homelessness and crime? How would you organize your office to ensure you are accessible to constituents and are able to respond to questions and provide solutions? And I think this goes to you first.
So I think of the council office as having two roles here in the city of Los Angeles. One is that it essentially acts as a concierge service for constituents who are having trouble accessing basic city services. So what we do is we troubleshoot when somebody comes in and says this particular service was supposed to be delivered and wasn't, or there's an issue. We go in with our field deputies and ensure that those issues are answered quickly. There is also a citywide policy role. I sit on legislative committees. I sit on boards like the Air Quality Management District or the Affordable Housing Solutions Agency. And for these, we have other staff members who support us to craft policies that come from, yes, the daily needs of District 4 residents and our own constituents, but also from research on citywide issues and addressing citywide priorities. When I was running the first time, I said we can do both. I said we can serve our constituents on a day-to-day basis right here in our district, and we can do big things across the entire city. And I think in the structure of our office, we've really tried our best to deliver on both.
All right. Lev?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What is the appropriate role of a council member with regard to issues of daily life, trash, streets, versus larger policy issues like homelessness and crime? How would you organize your office to ensure you're accessible to constituents and are able to respond to questions and provide solutions?
Thank you. It was a long question. I knew it was long.
Yes, it is.
ultimately, my first priority, and this might not be popular, is going to be my district. Because we have 15 city council members, and each city council member is elected to represent their district. So even though I understand that there are going to be decisions that we're going to have to make on a city-wide level, my priority is going to be you. It's going to be our district, and we have to respond to our constituents' concerns first. That's why I'm the constituents' candidate. Unlike my opponents, I'm not backed by special interests. I actually decided to run because we have a democratic process, and unlike other races that we're looking at right now in elections, we actually have a choice here, right? Sometimes we're stuck with not such great choices in other races, but here we have a choice, and ultimately, city concerns should be less about ideology and more about fixing the potholes, getting street lights. It's not about either extreme left or extreme right. I'm a centrist. Many people have asked me, are you Republican? Are you a Democrat? This is a nonpartisan race, and I want to bring practical, everyday approaches to our problems.
Ethan.
Thank you. The answer is you have to be able to do both. And the failure to do both is why I'm running for office. As a neighborhood prosecutor, it was my job to partner with the city council office to deliver services to the community. And when my opponent was elected, we had a breakdown there. The first field deputy she assigned to work with us in the police station was an activist who was on YouTube saying all cops are bastards, defund the police. And it became even more difficult because in my about 2 years working with her office, I believe we went through 7 field deputies in the same area. We never had any kind of continuity. And that caused breakdowns for communities like yours who needed services. So I'm running as someone who worked in the field with constituents every day to deliver services where you're at in your community. But at the same time, we have major policy problems that are not being addressed. We have a homeless industrial complex that keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. We're now spending $1.3 billion a year on homelessness, and the bureaucracy that is spending that money is fundamentally broken. And no one is talking about how do we fix it? How do we make our money actually work? And those are the big policy ideas that I'm running to advance.
Okay, please, would you hold your applause? Do you want to respond to that?
I mean, look, I think I started in the middle of pre-vaccine COVID, and I will say it was hard to staff up a council office. So it took a little while for us to find our feet, but I'm very, very proud to say that over the last 3 years, we have one of the largest teams in City Hall. We have an incredibly robust team that's serving our field, and we have an incredibly robust team that's serving the legislative priorities that we try and achieve across the entire city. One thing I'm particularly proud of that we modeled in our council office is that we actually do proactive outreach to constituents who may not even know that they can rely on the city. We've knocked on people's doors to tell them about rent relief, about vaccine availability, about composting programs. We've knocked on thousands of doors across the entire district about all of these issues. And that kind of community outreach work is something that we pioneered in Council District 4, and now it's being adopted in other places. We also delivered 10,000 composting pails to people, not just because we wanted to deliver a composting pail to somebody because we have environmental issues that we care about, but because it was an opportunity to talk about the city and the services that we can provide for people.
Lev, we're going to start off with you on this question, and it's about traffic. In 2023, at least 330 victims died from traffic violence in the city, exceeding the number of homicides. This is the highest number of traffic fatalities in over 2 decades. Yeah. What can be done to make our streets safer for everyone?
You're right. In 2023, there were 330 traffic fatalities. Most people don't know that car crashes are actually a leading cause of death for children in Los Angeles. And that's unfortunate. I mean, in a city such as Los Angeles, where there's unfortunately a lot of reasons for fatality, car crashes shouldn't be the #1 reason. So as I mentioned earlier, I commit to establishing a urban transportation planning, research, and development task force for the district. Okay, these are not issues that we can just kind of look at and, like I said, throw something against the wall and try to solve problems with. We have to look at the underlying data. We have to focus on high traffic speed zones. We have to increase lighting in intersections that are high traffic, Crosswalk design, there's things that we could do. We can have narrower streets and shorter high contrast areas that will ultimately be safer for pedestrians as well. So ultimately, if elected, I commit to having a special task force dedicated to this issue alone to work towards solving this problem.
Okay, Ethan.
So we absolutely need to be looking at environmental changes to make our community safer for traffic. But an issue that is often left out of this conversation is the intersection of traffic deaths and crime. Since I've been running for office, I'm no longer a neighborhood prosecutor, and I'm now a DUI prosecutor and a vehicle code prosecutor. And one of the leading causes of traffic deaths are hit and runs, DUIs, and reckless driving. And these are the crimes I now prosecute on a daily basis. And because our LAPD is dramatically understaffed, we used to be at 10,000 officers and now we're at 8,900, 8,800, the number of cases being sent to my office for prosecution is down. And if we talk about changing the laws and changing our community to keep people safer, someone needs to be enforcing those rules. And so many traffic violations are not being stopped because our police officers are too busy responding to calls for violent crime in the community. And so we absolutely need to be pursuing environmental changes to make our roads safer, but we also need to enforce our laws to keep our community safe.
Although I believe even the police union has said that it wants to back off on some of those calls, handling some of those calls. Is that right?
Yes, but understand why. Because they don't have the people to handle those calls. It's too many things on their plate right now. And this is what's been so frustrating about the conversation around policing over the last few years. As a society, we keep telling our community, or we keep telling police, we don't want you doing this, we don't want you doing that. But then no one else is there to step up.
Okay.
And it keeps falling back on them.
Thank you. Nithya.
So traffic safety is incredibly important, but it is a challenging issue to take on because the number one issue with regards to reducing traffic violence and reducing traffic crashes is actually traffic speed. In order to make streets safer, you do have to slow traffic, and that can often be hard for communities. But I will say that we have really pushed to ensure that we're putting in real safety, traffic safety interventions across the entire district. We've added traffic lights, we've added lighted crosswalks, we've added safety interventions outside of schools across the district to make them safer, including right outside of Franklin Elementary. The majority of traffic crashes where people are facing intense injury or death are actually happening at traffic lights. And so I actually just a couple weeks ago introduced a motion to ensure that we're doing everything in our power to make traffic lights as safe as possible. That means allowing pedestrians a little extra time to cross the street. That means making sure that intersections may not always have a free right. It means doing everything in our power to make those intersections as safe as possible.
Okay, let's kind of continue on with the theme of crime and public safety. And I believe this begins with you, Nithya. Do you support DA George Gascon's no cash bail policy? And I'll just make a notation, that's actually the Superior Court's policy now. The LA Superior Court has moved to no cash bail for nonviolent, non-serious offenders.
You know, it's not DA Gascon's policy. It has been a change that has been made by the Superior Court. And the court did this because this is not for people who are, anyway, I don't want to get into the weeds about this. But the reality is that this is the context in which we are operating. The evidence on this issue, on no cash bail, shows that people are not committing increased crimes as a result of it. Superior Court was convinced by research that was done by researchers across the country where they've looked at bail policies, and the change in bail policy was really narrowly crafted to address one piece of when you would be out on bail. And so for me, I think the key factor is we need to be utilizing when you're thinking about something like bail, you're trying to ensure that someone who is accused of a crime is incarcerated if they are unsafe to be out, right? Bail makes that decision on the basis of whether they can afford to pay their way out.
Okay.
And to me, that doesn't seem right. We should be looking at whether it's safe for someone to be out. And so this new policy allows judges to make that intervention. And as long as it's supporting safety, I'm supportive of it.
Okay. Lev?
I had my catalytic converter stolen about a year ago. It's probably a third of you have had the same thing happen to you in the last year. And unlike the incumbent, I don't blame the car manufacturer for having that happen. Really, the reason it's happening is because these crimes aren't being prosecuted, or even when they are being prosecuted, the culprits are left out on the street in the meantime, right, until they're going to be in front of a judge with no bail. So it's just common sense. We can't continue to have this happen, right? Last year, just this year, 14%, thefts are up 14%. Thefts are up 42% from this time 2 years ago. And I know Mr. Weaver is a community prosecutor, but there's failures there too. The lack of prosecution is ultimately the cause of this. Again, I don't blame our police. Our police hands are tied. I support funding police 100%. But the problem doesn't end with just more police officers. There has to be repercussions for these crimes, and having no cash bail is the opposite of that.
Ethan?
So you're speaking my language. This is stuff I work on every day. So I absolutely oppose zero cash bail. And you need to understand how this thing actually works. So first of all, there is a whole host of offenses that aren't just zero bail, but they are zero arrest, meaning that all LAPD can do is hand someone a ticket when the crime is committed. Their handcuffs don't even go on. I think that is crazy. Especially when we're talking about crimes, like a great example is 4118 around schools. Municipal code violations are just a ticket, and we can't even remove that person from the location. I think that's a problem. Second problem is if someone is actually held in custody, within 48 hours, they're going to be in front of a judge. And I will tell you, as someone who's in front of those judges every single day, 99% of the time, if that person does not have a felony or something like that, they are released within 24 to 48 hours. But it is such an important tool to be able to remove people from a difficult situation, identify people, and keep our community safe. And it has so demoralized officers in their ability to stop the kind of crime that affects you the most. Most of us are never going to be the victims of a felony, but many of us will be the victims of a misdemeanor, and that's what this affects.
Violent crime was, and we're going to start with, who we're going to start with, Lev?
Yeah.
I think we're starting with Lev. Thank you. Violent crime was down last year, but property crime was up. Please tell us how you would like to see policing change in the city, regardless of funding levels. In other words, whether funding for policing is increased, decreased, or holds steady, how should policing change in Los Angeles to be more effective?
So we cannot defund the police, period. And I know it says irrespective of the funding of police. The police, though, at the same time, have to be held accountable. I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born in this city. And the trauma of Rodney King was part of my adolescence, right? So we can't give anybody a blank check, and that includes our police officers who are hardworking members of our community, but also need to be held accountable under the highest standards, especially the highest standards of the law, because they are there to preserve and protect the law. So ultimately, I think it comes down to enforcing the laws that we have on the books. Again, here, I think it's not the failure of our police department, but rather the prosecution in our government from the highest to the lowest levels. We are not prosecuting criminals for these smash and grabs, for these burglaries, for these thefts. And so the police's hands are tied. What can they do if there's no prosecution? I support giving our police the tools to do their jobs, but also giving them the backing so that when they do their jobs, the same criminals are not out on the streets again.
Ethan.
Yeah, so there's there's a lot of things we can do as a city. When I was working in the Hollywood police station, we were tracking street gangs that were coming from other parts of the city or the other parts of the state and the country to do crime here, fence their goods, and leave. And they were doing that for two reasons. First, they knew that they were not likely to get caught. And that's because we don't have enough police. One of the reasons that burglaries are up, property crimes are up, is because there aren't enough officers to respond to these crimes. And response times are so slow for crimes like home burglary. It can take 20 or 30 minutes or even longer for officers to get there, and the criminals know that. That's the first target we put on our back. The second target we put on our back is criminals know if you want to do crime, come to Los Angeles, because even if you are caught, you're not going to be prosecuted. And the second thing we need to do as a city and as a county is elect a new district attorney.
Okay, could we hold off on the applause? Do I need to say that again? Okay, I think they just ate up your time.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Nithya.
Whoa, sorry. Can you ask
The
the
question is, violent crime was down last year, but property crime was up. Please tell us how you would like to see policing change in the city, regardless of funding levels. In other words, whether funding for police is increased, decreased, or hold steady. How should policing change in Los Angeles to be more effective? And maybe you could also explain, you're one of just 3 council members.
Not in 1 minute. I can't do that.
What's that?
I can't do that in 1 minute.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
let's
go
talk
ahead
about
and
the
answer
first
this one.
question. Yeah, let's do the first one. So I think what we have is a situation here in the city of Los Angeles, as in many major cities across America, where the number of police officers are actually decreasing. And so what we have to do is figure out how to ensure that many of the 911 calls that are now going to our police, most 911 calls are not for violent crime, that we're moving that as much as possible off of our police officers' plates. That's why I've pioneered the expansion of things like the Circle program, which responds to homelessness-related calls in Los Feliz and in Sherman Oaks through 911. So you actually call 911 and you're able to get those teams out. Pioneered the expansion of responses that can actually take these duties off of police officers' plates and leave police officers available to respond to violent crime and to respond to issues. Related to property crime, what we're finding in our district and what we're finding across the city is that many of them are done by organized rings. And so what we did, for example, when we had follow home robberies, was that the police department did a thorough investigation, made arrests, and the number of follow home robberies saw a sharp decrease. That's the kind of deep investigative work that we need to be empowering PD to be able to do. In order to be able to reduce these crimes.
I'm going to just follow up on this because you were one of 3 council people who voted against the police contract, which awarded pretty hefty raises to LAPD rank and file officers. And I think it's a demarcation between at least you and Ethan. I'm not sure where you stand, Lev, but let's just get everybody 30 seconds on this. Why did you, because the argument, of course, was that we needed to give higher raises in order to attract more police officers to the police department so we could get closer back up to the 10,000 level.
Look, I believe the costs in LA are going up a lot. Housing costs, inflation, everything's through the roof. City employees definitely deserve a raise. This particular contract included both very high raises for PD and very high starting salaries for PD, with the assumption that these increases in pay would actually allow us to recruit more police officers. That has not proven to be the case so far. Our last recruit class, as far as I know, was one of the smallest that we've seen. And what has happened as a result of this commitment, hundreds of millions of dollars have actually been taken out of our city budget. We were in surplus, and now we're in a $250 million deficit, which is only going to increase and impact all of the other services that matter for quality of life and for all of the things that matter for you in your neighborhood. Those DOT interventions, those buses into Griffith Park, none of that can be paid for.
Lev, would have you voted for that contract?
I absolutely would have voted for that contract. I don't think that was actually a raise, in my opinion. And I
It
think
was a raise.
Well, hold on. Let me tell you why I don't think it was a raise. It was 2 to 6% annually. If we look at what inflation is at in this country, 2 to 6% barely keeps up with inflation. So I think that was actually a cost of living adjustment, and I definitely would have voted in favor of it. I have family members who are police officers and who are in law enforcement. They're everyday people just like us, and they deserve a 2 to 6% annual, not raised, cost of living adjustment just to keep up with grocery bills and household expenses just like you and me.
Okay, Ethan?
Yes, I absolutely support the raise. I worked in a police station for 5 years. I know LAPD well. And officers tell me there's 2 reasons people don't want to work for LAPD. First was the pay, and thanks to Mayor Bass, that problem's been solved. But the second issue remains. It is that they say, Ethan, why would anyone want to work here when our elected leaders are just waiting for the moment to throw us under the bus as soon as something goes wrong? Morale is low because there is no leadership for LAPD in City Hall, and I'm running to provide that leadership.
Are you referring to Chief Moore?
No, I'm referring to our electeds. We can't outsource this. It needs to be our elected leaders first and foremost leading our civilian police.
Okay, let's move on to housing and development. And this, I believe, begins with you, Ethan. What is being done to prevent the destruction of RSOs, of rent-stabilized units?
What's being done?
What's being done to prevent the destruction of rent-stabilized units?
Well, I can tell you what we're doing wrong about protecting rent-stabilized units. Right now, the Valley is in the process of being upzoned, and the current plan put forth by the city calls for the upzoning of a lot of RSO units, And if you look at the map that is proposed right now, it looks like someone just scattered Monopoly pieces all over the map. It's a disaster. And the community in the Valley, Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association, a bunch of groups came to the table and said, hey, we have a different plan. Let's meet our state requirements and upzone high traffic corridors to protect our current housing stock. And it is a plan described by Mayor Bass as the gold standard of community engagement around the issue of housing. And this group has repeatedly asked to meet with the councilwoman, and she has refused to support that plan. I support that plan because ultimately, as we see a Los Angeles that needs to grow and needs more housing, the community has to be a part of that conversation. And right now, you, the community, are being forced out at every level. And I'm running to bring your voice back into that conversation.
Nithya?
So currently, because our plans are so outdated here in the city of Los Angeles, much of our capacity to build here in Los Angeles, much of our capacity to build multifamily units is actually where current rent-stabilized units are, which means that they are, at this time, the most under threat of being destroyed and rebuilt as, new luxury housing. In order to make sure that we are actually creating space for more development, for example, building housing where there are single-story strip malls along our major boulevards and thoroughfares, like along Wilshire or along Ventura, we actually have to reform our planning process and make sure that we update our codes. That's a process that I've been shepherding through by updating our community plans. We passed the Hollywood Community Plan. We're going to be passing 2 new community plans in the southern San Fernando Valley over the next 2 years. And we're also doing it by updating the housing element. By doing this update in a smart way, we can ensure that development happens in places where new housing can be built where there's no housing at all, something that right now is almost impossible to do because of the way our planning system is set up.
Okay, Lev, what about the destruction of rent-stabilized units?
Ultimately, I think that this can't be a zero-sum battle between lessors and tenants. There need to be some safeguards in place for tenants, but ultimately right now, what we see going on is politicians wanting to treat this as a battle between lessors or landlords and tenants. The plan that Mr. Weaver actually suggested, I was a part of creating that plan in the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council. I'm not going to say I wrote the plan, but it came through our committees, and we reviewed it, and we refined it, and we approved it in the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council, where I've served for 7 years. Ultimately, we need more housing, but it can't be at the expense of single-family homes and R1 zones either. Now, one thing that nobody's talking about, actually, is what's going on in Los Angeles that's also causing a shortage of housing is the speculative investments that these REITs are doing and other investment groups are doing. Very few people are talking about this, but this is also one of the reasons that we have a shortage in housing, because there are big companies not real people coming in and buying up property, buying up single-family homes, in many cases buying apartment buildings and leaving them vacant just to hold on to them as an investment for many years. Nobody's talking about this. That's also something that I want to stop from happening in Los Angeles.
Okay. Same general topic. The population of Los Feliz is majority renters, but much of our rental market is owned by small landlords. How do you balance between tenant rights while also protecting the rights of small landlords to support a thriving rental environment? Nithya.
I think that this is the reason why I've been pushing for better data. I'm very proud that we have passed significant expansions of renter protections here in the city of Los Angeles, in part because we face such incredible housing insecurity. I see tenant protections and the ability for the city to enforce tenant protections both as homelessness prevention efforts and community protection efforts. They really prevent gentrification if you can make sure that someone can stay in their existing housing. We in the City Council have been very worried about making sure that these tenant protections don't impact the capacity of small mom and pop landlords to also continue their business. This is why the largest amount of renter payments were made in the history of the city of Los Angeles during the time of COVID-related eviction moratoriums, most of which were in place long before I got into office. Almost $2 billion was paid out just in the Los Angeles area to ensure that landlords could stay whole and to make sure they could make their mortgage payments. Now what we're doing is doing a smaller mom and pop landlord fund for exactly this issue and asking for greater data on who is actually a smaller landlord, something our system doesn't have the capacity to identify so that we can target our resources most effectively.
Okay, Lev.
So I got into this a few minutes ago. I think maybe I was ahead of my time a little bit on the question. But again, I think this shouldn't be a zero-sum battle between lessors and tenants. There are many people who have worked hard. They are working class people who have bought, let's say, duplexes or quadplexes and are renting out those properties for income. And those people are being treated the same way as big corporations. In many cases, you have tenants who might have a better financial situation than some of their landlords. Unfortunately, the incumbent comes from an ideology that protects, the working class. Then there's nothing wrong with that, but there needs to be a differentiation between people who are taking advantage of that, right? If you're not paying your rent for a year and a half, and the landlord is also suffering just like you are, there needs to be a differentiation there. So we do have that data. They're called income tax returns, right? We can ask for the income tax returns of these lessors and see if they are corporations, then they will not get these exemptions. But otherwise, they need to be protected as well because some lessors are also everyday people just like you and me.
Okay, Ethan.
This is an issue I personally feel both sides of. I'm a renter. I live in a rent-stabilized studio apartment with my fiance, Michael. And I've lived in the same building for 9 years. And my building has been owned by the same family for 40 years. It's had the same apartment manager for 30 years. But then, during COVID, because of all of the problems around renting, the owners of my building said, screw this, we're done. And now my building is owned by Blackstone and managed by Blackstone. And the quality of my building has deteriorated significantly. They fired my on-site manager who'd been in that building for 30 years. And I had to help keep him from getting evicted or have to pay massive amounts of rent that he couldn't afford. So I understand this issue because I see the impacts of mom and pop landlords being pushed out of the market. And I know some of the people in this room, and I know that you are mom and pop small landlords that only own maybe 10, 20 units, and that's your retirement. And the problem our city faces is that we definitely want to protect tenants. I want to protect myself and my friends who are also tenants. But if we have gotten out of balance to where mom and pop landlords can no longer survive in this city, and we are destroying their livelihood.
All right, back to you, Lev, to begin with. Census reports show Los Angeles population is in decline rather than the growth that was predicted when many of the current housing policies were enacted. Many of us are concerned about overdevelopment and communities having no input into what is built in our neighborhoods. how can we adjust the policies to provide affordable housing without overdevelopment?
That's literally the billion, trillion-dollar question. So since 2020, we've actually had 270,000 people leave Los Angeles. Might not sound like much, but that's literally the population of Burbank, having packed up and left, right? Now, some of us, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, don't have that luxury. We can't just pack up and leave. I'm a lifelong Angelino. My family's been here for 60 years. My wife and I are raising 3 kids here. We want to give them an opportunity to stay in this city. And in order to do that, we have to solve the problems, starting with affordability, starting with having housing for everybody, starting with having opportunities to earn enough money in this very expensive city to stay here. This is a multi-pronged problem. I mean, we can't answer these solutions in 1 minute. But as the only candidate that is really vested in the future of Los Angeles, because I've been here my entire life and I want my kids and my grandkids to have an opportunity to stay here, and as somebody who's created businesses, created jobs in this city, I think that we can do it if we believe that we can do it. And that's where it starts. We have to believe that we can do it and look at data-driven and scientific approaches to making a plan that we can actually implement.
Thank you. Ethan.
As I see it, the challenge that faces us is 2 approaches, and one is ideologically driven. One ideology says that we should put housing everywhere, the maximum amount, in any way we possibly can, community be damned. And this is happening right now. In the Valley, there's this project called the Ethel Project. In the middle of a single-family neighborhood, very quiet, next to a school that serves 600 special needs students, a developer is dropping a 7-story, 200-unit apartment complex right in the middle of this single-family home neighborhood. And the surrounding community didn't even hear about it from the council office. They heard about it when the LA Times called them for comment. And this approach destroys communities when we just slap housing in any which way without the community input. By contrast, we should be growing as a city, but I believe with the community's support and input. When we are building, and we all know we need more housing, but when we're building and we bring the community along with us, we can build projects that actually match the community, that actually fit into the community, that allow the newcomers into our neighborhood to be an integrated part of our community, not just the isolated people in that tower down the street.
Okay, Nithya.
So our planning system is hideously out of date. We have community plans that are decades old. They were designed for a Los Angeles that actually has a much smaller population than we currently have. What we need to be doing is to ensure that we're able to update our plans and update our overlay zoning so that we can ensure that we're building for the Los Angeles of today. And that is exactly what the city is working on right now through the update of the housing element and through the updates of these community plans. This is how the city needs to meet this current moment. If we don't do this kind of planning, what will happen is that development will happen where individual parcels are being developed and the council office is responsible for determining, in some cases, whether or not a building gets built. That's a situation for corruption. That's the situation that we're in right now. So what we need to be doing is figuring out what are our values collectively? How do we want our neighborhoods to look? And how can we create a plan that meets our vision for this neighborhood and how we welcome more people into it? And once we do that, we can allow the plan to actually regulate development and take individual council office discretion out of it, reduce corruption, and ensure that we're developing in a way that makes sense for LA.
Okay, this section is labeled Support Political Influence. It's question number 14. There has been concern expressed that the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, has had outsized influence on Nithya Raman's governance, and that Ethan Weaver is taking campaign money from PACs that have developer, and I'll add, police union contributions. Levon Baronian is a relative newcomer, but we're sure someone will find something to dislike about his campaign soon. We could workshop that now if we wanted to. The question is this, is where is the influence coming from in your campaign, And how will that affect your time in office? And we're going to start with you, Ethan.
Great. There are outside groups spending in this race, and I'm legally prohibited from talking to them or engaging with them at all. But understand, they're not putting money into an account that says we support Ethan Weaver. They're putting it into a group called Opponents of Nithya Raman. And you have to ask them why on earth they would be opposed to the current status quo. And as I look around our city, I can see a lot of reasons why. But I also think this DSA piece is very important. You need to understand who really does have the ear of your council member. The DSA is the key backer behind my opponent. It's a group that believes in the abolition of private property and that police should be abolished. And this isn't just their beliefs. In the last election, when my opponent was seeking their endorsement, she put in her questionnaire that she believes in the principles of collective ownership of private property, which means getting rid of private property. And one of her staffers described their relationship as co-governance with the DSA and my opponent. That's real influence, and that's what we need to get out of City Hall.
As luck would have it, you're the next respondent, so let's hear from you, please.
Well, I just want to say, sometimes when I feel like sometimes when a woman runs for office, everyone wants to
Hold on. Let her answer. We're here to hear from.
Everyone
we want to
wants
hear
to
from them,
attribute-
not you. Remember that.
Sorry. Everyone wants to attribute control over her actions to somebody else. I chose to run for office. I have developed my own policies, and I will tell you that my policies are often the ones that DSA criticizes the most. Yes, they are part of a big, broad coalition of organizations that support me. I'm backed by over 60 groups. I have over 30 elected officials supporting me, including Mayor Bass, Congressman Sherman, Senator Ben Allen, Senator Henry Stern. All of these people, the Democratic Party of the San Fernando Valley, people are always trying to insinuate that I am somehow divisive. If you look at the group of organizations and individuals that are supporting me, I feel like I have built the broadest, biggest coalition to take on the challenges that Los Angeles is facing right now.
Okay, Lev.
Their donors are their owners. In reality, this is what differentiates me between my opponents, because they are both supported by special interests. They just happen to be opposing special interests. Mr. Weaver talks about independent expenditures and how the candidates themselves are not supposed to coordinate with. That's, yeah, of course, that's the law. But if you see how these things actually work, the candidates put up a video on a YouTube page that nobody visits, and then that independent expenditure committee just happens to run across that video and use it in their commercial. So that's ultimately the reason why I'm running, because I am not supported by special interests. I decided to run because I looked at both of these opponents, and again, nothing having to do with them personally. I had an opportunity to spend about 5-10 minutes with them in the back room. They are both very pleasant individuals. But I looked at who was supporting them, and I understood that there's nobody supporting us. They are represented both by special interests that just happen to be opposing one another, and I'm ultimately running because I'm the constituent's candidate.
May I respond? My name was brought up. May I
Sure,
respond?
why not?
Sure. I'm very proud to be supported by police, by fire, by 911 operators, by nurses, by first responders. This isn't special interest. These are the people that serve you every day and serve me every day. And I'm proud to have their support because they're serving all of us and they want to see our city get on a different track. And if you think that's special interest, then I think we have a different definition of what special interest is.
Can I rebut to that?
Yes.
Nobody supports the police and firefighters more than I do. The difference is when you take money from any organization, and that huge amounts of money, Mr. Weaver's campaign has benefited from about $300,000 of expenditure from the firefighters union. You become beholden to that one particular special interest. I want to support firefighters 100%. I support police officers 100%. But I also want to hold them accountable because they need to do their jobs well also. When you take that much money, or not directly, but have them spend on your campaign, guess what? At some point, you're not going to call them out when they're doing a wrong job. I want to hold them accountable while supporting them at the same time.
Well, and I'd like to say, just to point out that, unions often play an important role in campaigns. And we have to remember that unions, first and foremost, are wanting good contracts with the city. That's first and foremost what they're interested in. They're not necessarily always interested in the best policy for the city. They're interested in the wages and working conditions that their members have. So I think that's important to point out. Oh, that's a good point. Let's go to the rapid fire yes and no round. And let's just do this 1, 2, 3.
No,
Should we do some of the other questions before the rapid fire? Okay, sure. Absolutely. So these are a couple of the other questions that we're going to ask. And I think we begin with Nithya now. From unwalkable sidewalks to cracked streets to the inexcusable fact that the Griffith Park pool has been allowed to degrade to such a state that it won't be usable for years, what are you going to do to make sure that Los Feliz infrastructure gets repaired in a timely fashion?
Well, we have been investing in Los Feliz infrastructure. We have raised money from other sources of government to actually improve streets and safety interventions within Griffith Park, including adding traffic lights around the park and making sure that the streets coming into the park are safer. The Griffith Park pool, unfortunately, I inherited a very degraded facility. And what I've been trying to do in my time here is really to try and make sure that we're fixing it. We are redesigning it right now, and through the CTIEP program, we are actually accruing funds to be able to rebuild that pool. Yes, it will take a couple of years. That is what every city process takes. I didn't invent that process. That's just the process that we're in. But we are actually going to be rebuilding the pool, something I'm very, very excited about. But overall, I do want to say that I've seen both of my opponents talk about how much they want to spend on contracts and how much they want to spend on other kinds of payments to city workers. I'm also supportive of higher payments for city workers. I do want to say all of these things create real trade-offs. We don't have infinity money in this city. And so sometimes we will have to make hard decisions about how much infrastructure will cost, how we can invest in that infrastructure, and how we're going to fund all of these services on an ongoing basis. And that's something that I've been willing to have hard conversations with people about. So thank
If
you.
I could just ask a quick follow-up. You voted against the police contract, citing the expense to the city, which
Yeah.
is now facing a deficit. How will you vote on the civilian
Well,
workers
we have
contract?
two more contracts coming up, one for civilians and one for fire. At this point, I think it's very tough to say police get one set of raises and other groups don't get another set of
Okay.
raises. It does not make sense.
Okay.
At the same time, I think we're going to have to make some very, very hard decisions, some of which we're discussing in council over the next few days, about how we actually fund basic services. I hear from everyone over and over again that basic services are too slow, that trimming our trees takes too long, that putting in a new street light takes too long. This is true, but we are now in a situation where those times are not going to change because of the fiscal context that we are facing. And I think it's really, really important to have honest arbiters of the choices that are in front of you, and to really, really have honest conversations about what is it that you as a community prioritize, and how can we say some of the other
Okay.
things we're not going to get.
All right. Let's just get back to the unwalkable sidewalks, the cracked streets, the Griffith Park pool, Lev. What are you going to do to make sure that Los Feliz infrastructure gets repaired in a timely manner?
Excuse me. As mentioned earlier, I have a deeply personal connection to Griffith Park, to Los Feliz. I grew up going to Griffith Park. I grew up climbing the bear on Los Feliz Boulevard. My cousin and I used to call it Boo Boo. That was our park. We used to, play alongside that stream. You know, there's this concept of the broken window theory. I'm sure many of you have heard about this concept. It basically says that anywhere you have a broken window, it directly contributes to Blythe in that part of town, because when people look at that, they basically don't want to make anything else better. It's almost like a spiraling effect. Los Angeles is in many ways an old city. Our infrastructure is failing us. I live in the Valley. You guys don't have it that bad here in Los Feliz, but in the Valley, when it rains just a little bit, our entire streets are flooded. A couple months ago, we had a water main burst that flooded the entire neighborhood. So as your city council member, one of my priorities is actually going to be to invest in infrastructure so that we don't have to wait till things burst or explode or break down before we finally start fixing them. That includes street lights, that includes sidewalks, that includes our streets, but it also includes plumbing, the electrical grids in our city. All these things need to be upgraded, and I'm going to prioritize that as your city council member.
Okay, Ethan?
Thank you. When I think about walkable sidewalks, clean streets, trees trimmed, investing in Griffith Park, one person comes to mind, and that's Tom LaBonge. Tom LaBonge cared so much about this community. He was out walking the neighborhood. I ran into him more times than I can count hiking in Griffith Park. And I was told that his wife, Bridget LaBonge, is here. Is she still here? Thank you. That is the model of what we need in a council member, someone who's on the streets every single day. And the challenges are going to be hard. I mean, our business community is collapsing, our tax base is hollowing out, and we're going to face some real challenges in solving all of our major infrastructure problems. I'm under no illusion about that. But it starts with a council office that is on the sidewalks with you, that is feeling the pain with you, that is seeing the bright future that we can have, and is using creativity to find ways around these problems. And that's the model that I hope to bring as your next city council member.
Okay, here's a simple question. Why can't LA be as clean as other cities like Burbank and Beverly Hills, for example? Why do we have such a problem with graffiti and trash? Lev?
Ultimately, Los Angeles is a much, much bigger city than Burbank. And that's part of the nature of Los Angeles. One thing that those of us that are longtime Angelinos understand, that this is really like 50 cities put into one. And when you have such a big city and a centralized government, it's almost impossible for it to be responsive to all these needs in every local constituency, right? That's part of the reason why I ran for neighborhood council 7 years ago in Sherman Oaks, because I thought that could be a place where I could effectuate change on a neighborhood level. Unfortunately, I found out that was more of a system that was just created to let the neighborhood come out and vent, right, but not really get anything changed, right? So one of the things that I propose isn't necessarily expanding the size of city council. Let's give real power to our neighborhood councils, the people that are actually local in their neighborhoods, to make decisions, to actually throw some money behind those decisions and address those issues that you're talking about, like graffiti and other issues that are actually very local, right? You don't need somebody in City Hall to come and clean up the graffiti. You need somebody local to where you live.
Ethan?
Yeah, there's a very, very obvious reason why this is happening, because I know law enforcement in other jurisdictions, and they've told me straight up that in Burbank and Beverly Hills, when they enforce rules around homelessness and living on the sidewalks, and they will straight up tell people experiencing homelessness, hey, we enforce the rules here, but in the city of Los Angeles, they don't, right across the street. And that's why the city of Los Angeles has 40% of our county's population, but 60% of our county's homeless population. It's not because it's so much more difficult to live here than it is in Burbank. It's because we've allowed a culture of chaos to exist on our sidewalks. And then we wonder why graffiti pops up, why our streets are filthy, because we are carrying more of the county's load than we should. And this is where a central tenet of why I'm running is we have to start managing the homeless crisis better day over day. We have to manage the sprawl of encampments. Everyone feels compassion for people experiencing homelessness, but that compassion turns into anger when the encampment is in front of your home, there's needles on the sidewalk, there's feces on the ground, and that doesn't go away and no one comes to clean it up. And we have to invest in these things to start getting out of this mess.
Nithya?
I do want to say that part of the reason why Los Angeles has certain kinds of limitations on how we respond to encampments that a city like Burbank or Beverly Hills doesn't have is not because our rules are necessarily different, it's because we have lawsuits that we're dealing with that provide a different context here on how we can actually respond to these issues. One of the things that I've really focused on is on making sure that my response to homelessness addresses the context as it is right now. That's why I've been laser focused on housing hundreds of people at encampments across the district, including many in Los Feliz. As I said earlier, including along the LA River. We've housed 84 people. We do that by getting people off the streets, not by pushing them down the street, not by pushing them into another neighborhood, not by pushing them into another council district. We actually get people off the streets. And because they're off the streets, the areas can stay clear in a sustainable way. On cleaning, I do want to say that our council office has paid for extra clean teams, and our field team actually goes out into the neighborhood and files 311 requests. In fact, we filed over 3,000 311 requests to ensure that graffiti in the community is addressed and bulky items are picked up even before constituents tell us about it. We do that work right in our office. We can both address homelessness and keep our streets cleaner together, and we've done that in our council office.
Okay, we have just a few more questions here. We'll do the rapid round, but let's talk about animal services, which is an important issue for a lot of people. There's a crisis at animal services, and our shelters are overpacked. What are some solutions that you would support? And I think it goes to you, Ethan.
Yeah. It's very true. Our shelters are way overcrowded, and as an animal lover myself, it's heartbreaking. I see us having a couple challenges. One is I see a lot of opportunity for us to partner with the community better, whether it's adoption days or partnering with nonprofits that can help us house animals that have no home. I've been very grateful to have the support of people in this nonprofit space that are so frustrated with working with the city, with a general manager that doesn't understand the problems and understand how to work with them. And we're leaving tremendous opportunities on the table to partner with the community to start solving these problems. And then also, this is a place where I think a council office can exercise not just leadership in City Hall, but leadership civically. I mean, one of the things that really matters to me is, in my administration, putting a focus on creating community spaces, events for the community to come together. And I would love for us as a council office to put forward a lot more animal adoption events so that the community come somewhere that it doesn't feel like a prison to see these animals that need a home, and that's where compassion's built and that's where change is made.
Nithya?
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership at Animal Services has been an ongoing problem. This has not, I will confess that this has not been, I've never sat on the committee that controls this issue, so this has not been a focus of my legislative work at City Hall, and we don't have a shelter in our district. But I do think leadership at the department has been really, really challenging. Volunteers have been limited in what they can do, animals are not being cared for, and this has been an ongoing problem for the city of Los Angeles. I think we need to make sure that the department is adequately staffed. We need to make sure that staffed positions are actually being hired rather than just sitting unfilled for very, very long periods of time. And we have to make sure that leadership at the department is really, really held accountable for making real improvements, something that the city has not done in recent years. I am excited that there has been a renewed focus on animal services because of the new mayor coming in and because of pressure on this issue from across a number of council offices. And I'm looking forward to working with my colleague, Councilmember Blumenfield, who's also made this an issue, to ensure that we're making progress on it.
Lev?
I don't mean to sound insensitive, but obviously we're not treating our animals and having adequate animal services when we can't even get to treating our humans with adequate services in this city. This city is broken on every single level, and it ultimately manifests in animal services. We don't have a shelter in the district, as mentioned by Ms. Raman. We definitely should have a shelter in this district. I think this is an opportunity for increased private-public partnerships, right? I think this is one of those places where that's an ideal type of a solution, where you can have nonprofits that are catered toward providing care for animals that can work with the government, maybe get some funding. Of course, the funding, they need to be accountable for that funding. It can't be like, the homeless industrial complex where we spend $1.4 billion without much accountability. But I think there's a great opportunity here to bring in nonprofits and create a public-private partnership to address the needs that the city's unable to do so.
There obviously are a lot of partisans in the audience, but I'm sure there are quite a few folks who are also undecided. Maybe each of you could describe what you bring that's unique to this office, or would bring that's unique to this office, and what distinguishes you the most from the other two candidates. In other words, what really makes you stand out? And I believe we begin with you, Nithya.
I came into this role from my training as an urban planner, from being a community volunteer and really wanting to take on more that I didn't see being taken on in my community. And to me, that is really what I bring to the table every single day and what my team brings to the table every single day. I bring an incredible focus on the big issues that matter to Angelenos. My team works incredibly hard, as do I. We have the strongest work ethic of anybody in that building, and we've gotten real results on the issues that matter, on renter protections, on environmental issues, on addressing homelessness. On all of these issues, I hear really easy answers from my fellow table mates here. There are no easy answers. There is only hard work and honest conversation with constituents about the kinds of trade-offs that we're going to have to make. That is what I've brought to the table every single day. That is what has distinguished me as an elected official. That's why I have such rich collaborations with my fellow elected officials, why I'm endorsed by so many organizations. And I think it is really what Los Angeles needs in order to step into its future. This is not a time where easy answers will suffice.
Lev.
Perseverance. Throughout my career, I've solved complex problems on a daily basis, some of which are probably more complex than what my opponents have seen in their entire careers. In NASA, for example, I worked building the systems that our flight engineers use to test every single part that went into a flight that goes into space. You can imagine the immense pressure that puts on you when you know that you're ultimately responsible for a several $100 billion project, and up the chain, if there's one failure, right, that is not acceptable. Ultimately, I have children, and my wife and I teach them that half of success is showing up, it's perseverance. There are a lot of problems in Los Angeles, but I do believe that we can solve them with hard work. I'm the only candidate that is not a representative of the special interests. I'm the constituents candidate. I'm a working class member of this community. I've had to provide for my family, myself, by rolling up my sleeves, and there's days when you're a parent that you can't give up. I plan to bring the same type of work ethic and commitment and not giving up to city council.
Ethan.
There are three significant things I bring that no one else does. First, as 5 years as a neighborhood prosecutor, I spent 5 years as a field deputy, working in the community with neighbors to solve problems. And that perspective is critical because we need leadership that puts community first and believes in showing up for the community and solving their problems first. The second thing that I bring is, as a neighborhood prosecutor, for 5 years, it was my job to transform City Hall policy into actions on the streets. Every time City Hall changed its policy around homelessness, around crime, it was my job to make those policies work. And no one else in City Hall at all has ever had the responsibility of actually enforcing the laws that City Hall writes. The third thing that I bring to the table is a proven track record of overcoming city obstacles. There's many of my cases, I was told, no, you can't solve this problem. When a neighbor took over a blue ribbon veteran site at Cahuenga and the 101 and started operating his restaurant there, I was told there was nothing we could do about it. I built a coalition of city agencies, prosecuted him, and got him to restore the triangle to repair the damage he caused. I've overcome these obstacles.
All right, let's do that rapid fire question round now. And I think what we'll do is we'll just go Lev, Ethan, Nithya each time, just to make it easy. The first question is, do you support the rent control bill that will be on the California ballot in November? Lev, are you familiar with it?
No.
Okay. Ethan?
No.
No, you're not familiar with it, or no?
No, I'm not supporting it.
Oh, and Nithya?
Yes.
Okay. Do you support the Taxpayer Protection Act that will be on the California ballot in November? Lev?
Which measure is this? Do you have the number?
I wish I did have the number. I'm not familiar with the measure either. I'm reading the rapid fire questions here.
Can you come back to me? 'Cause
Absolutely.
I have notes on this.
Are you familiar with it, Ethan?
I believe so. No.
You don't support it. And Nithya? Boy, this is like
I
a
don't-
civics question.
No, I don't support it. I don't support it.
Okay. Do you believe property taxes should increase or remain the same? Lev?
I think property taxes should remain the same. Yes.
Okay. Ethan?
Remain the same.
Nithya?
I mean, Prop 13 is the law of the land.
Yeah.
It's not a city bill.
Should the city council have more than 15 members? Lev?
No.
Not unless we do real structural reform on how power works. If that happens, I'm all on board.
Nithya?
Yes, and I am actually doing the structural reform on how power works. I'm one of the leading people on the council doing governance reform.
And finally, did you guys really write this question? Is Los Feliz the best neighborhood in CD4?
We're in Los Feliz, so yes.
I've lived all over Los Angeles. I've lived in the Valley, I've lived on the West Side, and I've lived in Los Feliz for almost 10 years. This is my home, and I love Los Feliz.
I love Los Feliz. I live right next to it. It's amazing.
Okay. It's time for closing statements. At the very top, I kind of skipped over a question which asked about the 3 top priorities that you're going to have. Maybe you could incorporate in your final answer, your closing statement to voters, why you think they should vote for you, and include in that answer the top 3 priorities that you'll have as if elected council person. Let's do 2 minutes on this too. So let's start where we began with Ethan.
Great. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's been such a pleasure to get to speak with you. I'm running for 2 reasons. One, to address constituent services on the ground and bring your voice into City Hall. But the second reason is I want to tackle the systemic problems that are causing our failures across our city. So as it relates to constituent voices, I pledge to be your voice in City Hall, and not just in City Hall, but in this community. I'm going to have, as a council member, regular office hours in the district so that you can meet with me in your community and don't have to schlep down to City Hall. I am going to invest in the best field deputies in our city and have key members of my team that usually wall themselves off in City Hall, like my planning director, come to your community to talk about changes and collect your input. But then at the structural level, I see the top 3 priorities that we have to solve is this. One is we have to reform our homeless system from top to bottom. We are spending $1.3 billion a year on homelessness, and as someone who's worked with the lead agency on that, I will tell you that bureaucracy is designed to fail. It is the most horrific bureaucracy I've ever seen, and I've seen some doozies. Until we actually structurally reform that, no matter how much money we spend, we're never going to get out of this problem. But in the short term, that's going to take time. In the short term, we have to start managing this problem better day over day. So problems like the Bridge Home Shelter do not poison this community against helping the homeless. It is not your fault that you're frustrated. It is the city's fault for failing you. Second, we need to rebuild our first responders. LAPD and our fire department and our 911 operators are all horrifically understaffed, and they are at their breaking point. And we need leaders in City Hall that understand these services, because I've worked with them, and have a plan to solve them. And finally, we are destroying our small business community. Our small business community is on the verge of collapse, and no one is advocating for them. No one's fighting for them in City Hall. And and I'm running to protect our small businesses. So thank you.
Nithya Raman.
Thank you so much to all of you for being out here. Thank you to the Los Feliz Improvement Association for hosting this, and to you, Frank, for moderating. I am running for re-election because in the district, I've had a track record of addressing issues that were worsening before I got here and are now improving. We've made real progress on tackling homelessness in the district. Large encampments that were there across the district when I got elected, or when those areas were redistricted into my neighborhood, are now gone. Not because we made casual statements or talked about simple solutions, but because we did the incredibly hard work of making our homeless services system work for us. We have housed people across the district at encampments, including in Los Feliz, along the river, across the valley, and I'm very, very proud of the work that we've done. We've also passed big legislative changes to protect tenants and prevent homelessness, to reform City Hall and make sure that we have an independent redistricting system. And these are some of the same priorities that I'll have into my new administration. If I'm reelected, I'll continue to focus on homelessness and take the work that we've done right here in our district and make it citywide in partnership with Mayor Bass, who's one of my strongest supporters in this race, because she sees the progress that we have made. I want to make sure that we are addressing housing costs. We have to build more affordable housing. We have to make sure that we're using every tool in our toolbox to protect renters who are feeling incredible amounts of precarity. That requires planning change, and that requires institutional change at our housing department, both of which I've already been leading on and what I want to continue doing. Finally, I want to take on environmental issues, whether they be at the district level, that transform our transportation system, make it safer for us to get out of our cars and walk the streets, or changing policy at the citywide level that will move us towards actually getting the clean air that we deserve here in Los Angeles. I am committed to this job and committed to having the hard discussions that we need to have about all the trade-offs that all of this will require for us.
Thank you. And finally, Levon Baronian.
I'd also like to thank the LFIA for hosting this candidate forum, and also you, Frank, for being a great moderator tonight. Also, I'd like to thank the audience for being here, taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here and listen to all the candidates. This was actually the first opportunity to listen from all three candidates. Up until now, my opponents have only debated one another. Last week, they were okay participating in the debate without me. Maybe they didn't have a choice over that.
I tried to get you invited.
Thank you, Nithya. But again, I'm ultimately grateful for being here. Albert Einstein said that insanity, the definition of insanity, is doing the same things and expecting a different result. Ultimately, I'm here, I'm running, because I looked at the two candidates that were on the ticket, and they represented, to me, this is my opinion, but I have the right to it, more of the same in the city of Los Angeles. Those groups that are endorsing them and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on their campaigns are, guess what, the same groups that did the same thing for the last 20 candidates that were in these districts. So ultimately, it comes down to, if we really want change, we have to vote in candidates that are about real change, that are not basically representatives of their special interests. I'm the constituent candidate. I'm a family man. I'm doing this for my children. I'm doing this for your children. I believe that my career as a computer scientist and software engineer has uniquely positioned me to solve complex problems. Los Angeles is facing a lot of complex problems. We need to have a data centric and analytical approach to solving our problems. It isn't just business as usual. Business as usual is not enough anymore. So I'm thankful for this opportunity to be here in front of you. I immensely love Los Angeles. I think this is the best city in the world, but it still has a lot of potential, and we have to work together. We have to work hard. We have to roll up our sleeves. We have to be smart in helping Los Angeles realize its full potential for our future. Thank you.
There are a lot of great places to get information about these candidates, including their websites and LAist voter game plan, a shameless plug. It'll publish the first week of voting, which is in just 2 weeks from now, and we have one more announcement for you.
Well, let's thank our stern, but I think fair, taskmaster, Frank Stoltze. Let's thank all the candidates for being here. An event like this is not meaningful if we can't hear what they have to say, and one man is very much responsible for it sounding so good tonight, and that's Quyen, who has been handling the audio all by himself. I think the best way we can thank the wonderful Los Feliz Improvement Association and the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council, and especially the Autry, is by not loitering in the hall at 8:30 and not loitering out in the courtyard either. In fact, I've been told if we do, security will toss us. So anyway, everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Drive safely.